The desert had a way of swallowing sound. At night, when the winds rose and slithered through the dunes, it seemed as if the whole world was whispering in a forgotten tongue. Dr. Layla Morgan stood at the entrance of the excavation site, her lantern's dim flame trembling against the oppressive dark. Behind her, the half-buried ruins of a fortress loomed, its ancient walls half devoured by sand and time. Before her stretched a yawning hole in the earth, freshly uncovered after weeks of careful digging. The villagers had begged her not to dig here. They had crossed themselves, muttered prayers, and warned her in hushed tones that the ruins were cursed, that this place was not a tomb but a prison, a place where even the gods themselves would not tread. Layla had smiled politely, thanked them, and continued her work. She had heard warnings like this before at countless other digs. Archaeology was, after all, as much about superstition as it was about stone and dust. But now, staring into that black void, she felt the first uneasy weight of their words pressing against her chest. "Dr. Morgan?" came a voice from behind. Layla turned. Daniel, her assistant, clutched his own lantern nervously. His blond hair was plastered to his forehead with sweat despite the cool night air. "The team's ready," he said. She nodded and lifted her lantern higher. "Let's see what we've uncovered." The passage yawned before them like the throat of some slumbering beast. The steps leading down were narrow, cut from uneven stone, their surfaces slick with centuries of dust and dripping moisture. Layla descended first, the echo of her boots swallowed by the dark. The air grew colder, heavier. By the time she reached the bottom, she could feel the damp chill clinging to her skin like a shroud. The corridor stretched out before them, long and narrow, flanked on either side by rows of iron-barred cells. The walls dripped with condensation, and the flicker of their lanterns threw shadows across the slick stone. Every step echoed, bouncing endlessly along the corridor, until it felt as though unseen footsteps followed just behind them. Daniel muttered, "Looks like a dungeon." "It does," Layla admitted, though she knew that this was no medieval fortress. The architecture was wrong. These stones were older, their joins marked with hieroglyphic carvings so worn by time they were almost illegible. She leaned closer to one, brushing her hand along the wall. The inscription sent a shiver through her as she whispered the translation. "The chains of eternity bind the defiant. Break them not, or death shall be unchained." Her breath misted as she spoke the words. She frowned. The temperature was dropping too quickly for natural causes. She tugged her coat tighter around her shoulders. The rest of the team filed in behind her. Michael, their photographer, burdened with his heavy camera. Dr. Hassan, the Egyptologist who could recite hieroglyphs as easily as his prayers. And Sarah, the graduate student, young and eager, but already pale with nerves. They clustered close, their lanterns casting overlapping circles of light. Why would there be prison cells in a tomb? Sarah asked, her voice thin against the dark. Hassan adjusted his spectacles. "Not prisoners," he said grimly, running. A finger along one of the iron bars. "Not in the way you think. These weren't made to keep men inside. These were made to hold something far worse." As if in answer, a low groan echoed down the corridor. The team froze, lanterns trembling in their hands. The sound was deep, ancient, and it came from somewhere far ahead, from beyond the reach of their light. Probably just the stone settling. Michael said, though his voice lacked conviction, "Lila." Straightened. "We keep moving." Step by step, they pressed deeper into the corridor. The air grew more oppressive, filled with the faint tang of something metallic like old blood. The floor was slick in places, the stones uneven, forcing them to move cautiously. At intervals, they passed more hieroglyphs carved into the walls. Each one carried warnings. The gate must remain closed. The chains must not break. The jackal watches. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the corridor opened into a vast chamber. Their lanterns barely illuminated the vaulted ceiling above, carved into the shape of an arching dome. At the far end stood a massive stone door, sealed, with chains so thick they gleamed black in the light. The surface of the door was covered in carving scenes of judgment, scales weighing souls, and the looming figure of Anubis, his jackal head staring out with unblinking eyes. Sarah let out a sharp breath. That's him, isn't it? Anubis. Hassan nodded slowly. The guardian of the dead. Layla approached the door, her lantern casting a golden sheen over the chains. Each link was etched with hieroglyphs, wards of protection. She leaned closer to the carvings on the stone itself. The story unfolded in images. A pharaoh kneeling before Anubis, chains wrapping around him, his crown cast aside. Above the pharaoh, the words burned with warning. Here lies the defiant king, chained by the god of death. Let none unbind him. Michael swallowed. So this isn't a tomb. It's a prison. The words seemed to echo in the chamber. Prison. Daniel shifted uneasily. So what do we do? Leave it? Seal it back up? Layla hesitated. Every instinct screamed that this was something best left untouched. Yet the archaeologist in her, the hunger for discovery, could not look away. We document it, she said. Finally, we don't break anything. Just record we found. They set to work. Michael's camera flashed in the dark, the light momentarily illuminating the carvings with stark clarity. Hassan transcribed the hieroglyphs, muttering translations under his breath. Sarah sketched furiously, while Daniel examined the chains. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the scratch of pens and the click of the camera. Then, as midnight approached, the chamber grew colder still. Their breath clouded the air like smoke. The lanterns flickered, their flames guttering as though suffocated. Did you feel that? Sarah whispered. Layla looked up. The chains on. The stone door were vibrating softly at first, then with growing intensity. The sound was faint, like the rattle of distant metal, but it reverberated through the floor beneath their feet. Step back, Layla ordered. The team gathered close as the vibrations intensified. The chains clattered, dust showering from the ceiling. With a groan that echoed like thunder, the massive door shuddered. One of the chains snapped with a deafening crack, the sound so loud it sent Michael sprawling to the ground. Another chain followed, snapping like brittle bone. No. Hassan breathed. This cannot be. Leela's lantern shook in her hand. The door was moving. Slowly, agonizingly, it creaked open. A thin sliver of golden light spilled from within, flooding the chamber with an otherworldly glow. The air filled with a low, resonant hum, like the heartbeat of something ancient and immense. From the gap in the door came a whisper, not in words, but in something deeper, a sound that spoke directly to the marrow of their bones. Layla's breath. Caught. She could not understand it, yet she knew its meaning. The chains were breaking. The prison was opening. The last thing she heard before the chamber plunged into chaos was the faint whisper of countless voices, echoing through the dark. We are unbound? The golden light seeping through the cracks in the door was blinding, almost liquid in the way it pulsed and shimmered. Layla shielded her eyes, her heart hammering. The heavy chamber air thrummed with energy, and though no wind stirred, there. Lantern flames stretched and twisted toward the door as if drawn to its glow. Close it, Daniel shouted, lunging forward. He grabbed one of the remaining chains, trying to force it back into place, but it burned his hands as though it were alive. He fell back, clutching his palms. The door opened wider, groaning as stone ground against stone. The golden light thickened, filling the chamber, until every shadow was banished. And then silence. The team stood frozen, their ragged breaths the only sound. Slowly, cautiously, Layla raised her lantern. Through the widening gap, they could see what lay beyond Dot. It was not a room, but a sanctum. Vast pillars rose to a vaulted ceiling carved with constellations in lapis and gold. Incense burners, long extinguished, lined the walls, yet faint trails of smoke curled upward as if freshly lit. At the center of the sanctum stood a raised stone altar. Upon it lay a body, wrapped tightly in linen, preserved as though entombed yesterday. The mummy's form was regal. Even in death, it radiated power. The wrappings were gilded with faint threads of gold, and an ornate mask of obsidian covered the face. Beside the altar loomed a statue of Anubis, towering jackal-headed, holding the scales of judgment in one hand and a golden staff in the other. Its eyes glimmered faintly, twin sparks of crimson light. Sarah's voice trembled. "It's beautiful." "It's impossible," Hassan whispered. "The preservation, the artistry, this isn't any pharaoh I've ever studied. This was a king who sought more than kingship. This was a man who defied the gods." Layla's pulse raced. She stepped closer, drawn by the altar. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to stop, but something greater curiosity, awe, destiny pulled her forward. She brushed her fingers lightly over the carved hieroglyphs at the base of the altar. The inscriptions told a grim story. He sought to command Anubis. He sought to weigh the gods upon their own scales. For his blasphemy, he was chained. The guardian watches. Leela felt her throat tighten. This isn't a tomb. It's a warning. Michael, ignoring her words, was snapping photographs, the flash of his camera harsh in the golden glow. Each burst of light seemed to make the shadows writhe unnaturally. Daniel, still nursing his burned hands, muttered, "If this is a warning, maybe we should leave now." But Hassan was transfixed by the statue. His lips moved silently as he read the inscriptions carved into its base. "This place, it's not only a prison, it's a temple. The pharaoh's body was left here, bound as part of the punishment. But Anubis," he trailed off, eyes widening. "Anubis himself guards this place. The god is not a symbol. He is here." As if in response, the statue's eyes flared brighter. The air shuddered, vibrating with a low hum that resonated in their bones. The golden light thickened, turning darker, tinged with crimson. "Back!" Layla ordered, but before anyone could move, Michael stepped closer to the altar. Something glittered at the mummy's side, an amulet, shaped like an Ouroboros, a serpent devouring its tail. Its surface gleamed with strange light. Michael reached out. "Don't touch it." Layla cried. Too late. His fingers closed around the amulet and wrenched it free. The effect was immediate. The chamber shook violently, dust raining from the ceiling. The air split with a crack like thunder, and the incense burners burst into flame, filling the sanctum with choking smoke. The statue's eyes blazed as red as blood, and from its mouth came a sound no human throat could make, a guttural snarl that reverberated through the stone. The mummy on the altar stirred. Its chest rose in a slow, deliberate breath. Sarah screamed. Michael stumbled back, clutching the amulet. His face twisted in horror as the flesh of his hand blackened, veins bulging beneath his skin, spreading up his arm like creeping vines. His scream choked into a guttural cry, his eyes glowing faintly amber. "Put it back," Hassan shouted. "Put it back before it's too late." But Michael doubled over, clutching his stomach. His body convulsed violently, bones cracking, limbs twisting. His fingers lengthened into claws, his jaw reshaping into a grotesque snout. His scream morphed into a jackal's howl that echoed through the chamber. "God help us," Sarah whimpered. The statue moved not. It was not merely stone. The jackal-headed figure stepped down from its pedestal, each movement deliberate, regal, terrifying. Anubis towered over them, his form both divine and monstrous muscles rippling beneath blackened skin, golden armor glinting in the unnatural light. His jackal head turned toward them, and his eyes burned like coals. The god spoke, his voice a thunderous growl that shook the walls. The chains are broken. The balance is undone. Who dares awaken the guardian of souls? Layla fell to her knees, her lantern slipping from her hands. Her voice caught in her throat, but she forced herself to speak. We mean no harm. We didn't know. Silence. Anubis roared. His staff slammed into the ground, sending cracks, spider-webbing through the stone. The living trespass where only the judged may tread. You seek what is not yours. You steal from the dead. For this you shall be weighed. The scales he carried shimmered, golden plates balanced on a beam. From the shadows, whispers grew louder, countless voices, chanting, begging, condemning. The very air was alive with restless souls. Michael, or what he had become, rose to his feet. His body was no longer human. Fur rippled across his skin, his mouth twisted into a snarling jackal's maw. He let out a guttural growl and dropped to all fours, eyes fixed hungrily on the others. Michael? Daniel whispered, horrified. Creature snarled and leapt, claws scraping the stone as it lunged at Daniel. Layla reacted instinctively, shoving Daniel aside. The beast crashed into the ground where he had stood, snarling in rage. Sarah screamed again, scrambling backward. Run! Layla shouted. The team bolted, fleeing down the corridor they had entered. The air seemed to warp around them, the golden light chasing them like a living thing. Behind them, the sound of Anubis's footsteps echoed like drumbeats, slow and inexorable. Fools! The god's voice boomed. You cannot flee judgment. The duet is open. The dead awaken. The walls trembled. From the iron-barred cells lining the corridor came rattling sounds. Skeletons shifted, bones scraping against stone. Hollow eyes glowed faintly as ancient prisoners stirred, their shackled forms rising from centuries of slumber. The team stumbled forward, terror fueling their steps. Hassan clutched his satchel, muttering desperate prayers under his breath. Daniel dragged Sarah along, her sobs echoing in the darkness. Layla looked back once. The sanctum was ablaze with unnatural light, and at its heart, Anubis stood tall, his staff raised, his eyes blazing with fury. Michael no longer Michael skulked at his side, a jackal warrior bound to his will. The god's words followed them, a thunderous decree that shook the stones of the tomb. The chains of eternity are sundered. The gate of Duat shall open. The souls of the damned shall walk once more. Layla's blood ran cold. She knew then that this was no ordinary curse. They had unleashed something far greater, something unstoppable. And unless they found a way to restore the balance, the world above would soon drown in shadows. The corridor twisted endlessly, its stones groaning as if the tomb itself were alive. The air reeked of dust, decay, and something fouler, something that smelled like burnt flesh. Layla's lungs ached with every breath as she pushed the others forward, her lantern's flickering light cutting a narrow path through the dark. Behind them, the distant echo of claws scraping stone told them Michael was hunting. No, not Michael anymore. Whatever remained of their friend was gone, consumed by Anubis's curse. Keep moving, Layla shouted, though her voice cracked with exhaustion. Sarah sobbed as Daniel dragged her along, her legs buckling. Hassan trailed close, muttering feverishly under his breath, his hands shaking as he clutched his satchel of notes. They turned the corner and found themselves in another vast chamber. This one was different, less grand than the sanctum, but no less disturbing. Cells lined the walls, their iron bars rusted but unbroken. Inside, skeletal figures sat slumped in chains. Some had collapsed into heaps of brittle bone, while others remained eerily upright, their empty sockets staring out at the intruders. Sarah whimpered. "God, oh God," Daniel squeezed her shoulder. "Don't look. Just keep going." But Layla couldn't look away. She approached one of the cells, her lantern casting trembling light across the remains. Hieroglyphs were etched into the walls behind the skeletons, phrases repeating over and over in different forms. "Bound by eternity. The defiant shall not pass into do it. The guardian watches." She swallowed hard. "These aren't criminals," she whispered. "These are priests, nobles, soldiers, people who followed the Pharaoh in his rebellion. They weren't buried. They were entombed here, alive." Hassan's face was ashen. Anubis condemned them. The god himself must have decreed it. They weren't allowed passage into the afterlife. Their souls were chained here. As if in answer, one of the skeletons twitched. Its jaw creaked open, and a hollow whisper escaped its teeth. "Unbound? Unbound?" The sound spread like a contagion. All around them, skeletons stirred, bones rattling, as the dead shifted against their chains. The whisper rose into a chorus, countless voices echoing through the chamber. Sarah screamed and pressed her hands over her ears. "Move!" Layla ordered, dragging the others toward the opposite corridor. But as they reached the archway, a figure stepped from the shadows. Michael, or rather, the creature that had been Michael. His body was warped beyond recognition, elongated limbs, claws dripping with black ichor, a jackal's head snarling with hunger. His eyes glowed like molten amber as he crouched low, blocking their path. Daniel raised a trembling hand. "Michael, please. It's us." The creature tilted its head, a low growl rumbling from its throat. For a heartbeat, something flickered. In its gaze, recognition, hesitation. But then it lunged. Daniel shoved Sarah aside as Michael Beast slammed into him. They crashed to the ground, Daniel screaming as claws raked his arm. Layla swung her lantern, the metal casing smashing into the creature's side. Fire spilled across its fur, and it howled in rage, rolling away. "Daniel!" Layla cried, pulling him to his feet. His arm bled heavily, but he staggered upright. They fled deeper into the tomb, the growls of the beast echoing after them. The corridor narrowed, forcing them into single file. The walls here were covered in elaborate murals paintings of Anubis standing over a chained Pharaoh, scales tipping heavily against him. Beneath, the Pharaoh's followers knelt, their chains binding them to the earth. At the end of the corridor, they stumbled into yet another chamber. This one was circular, its ceiling painted with stars that glowed faintly in the dark. At its center stood a massive stone dais, upon which rested a carved tablet. Hassan staggered forward, eyes wide. This is the prophecy." He brushed the dust from the carvings, his voice trembling as he translated aloud. "When the chains are broken, the gate of Do-It shall open. The souls of the damned shall walk the earth, unbound and vengeful, only by restoring the serpent to the altar and balancing the scales. May the guardian's wrath be stilled." Layla's stomach dropped. She turned to Hassan. "The amulet. Michael took it." Hassan nodded grimly. It was no trinket. It was the seal. Without it, the Pharaoh's soul and the damned with him are free. Sarah's voice shook. "And we have to get it back." Before anyone could reply, a deep voice filled the chamber. "The seal is broken. The scales demand balance." Anubis, the god, appeared in the archway, towering, radiant with dark power. His jackal eyes burned as he stepped forward, the weight of his presence nearly driving them to their knees. Behind him, Michael skulked like a loyal hound, growling low. Anubis raised his staff, and the chamber trembled. You trespassers have undone what was bound for eternity. The damned stir. The world of the living and the do-it grow thin. Choose, restore the balance, or join the chained. Layla's heart pounded. She looked at Daniel, pale and bleeding. Sarah, shaking uncontrollably. Hassan, clutching the prophecy tablet with desperate reverence. She knew what the god demanded. "Take me," she whispered. The others turned, horrified. Layla stepped forward, voice steady despite the fear gnawing. Her insides. "Take me in exchange. Bind me. Seal the gate again." Anubis tilted his head, studying her. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then, slowly, his maw twisted into what might have been a cruel smile. Willing soul, strong, defiant, you would serve well as guardian." The scales in his hand glowed, one plate sinking lower. But choice is not so simple. To restore balance, sacrifice must be weighed against defiance. You will be judged. The chamber shook violently. Chains erupted from the floor, coiling, around Layla's wrists and ankles. She gasped as they tightened, dragging her toward the dais. "Layla!" Daniel cried, staggering forward. But Michael snarled and lunged, forcing him back. Anubis raised his staff, shadows lengthening like claws around the chamber. "Prepare, mortal. The scales await your soul." The last thing Layla saw before the darkness swallowed her was Anubis's. Blazing eyes and the faint glimmer of the Ouroboros amulet clenched in the beast's clawed hand. The chains dragged Layla across the stone floor, their links glowing faintly as if forged from the night sky itself. She struggled, but their grip was unyielding, pulling her toward the dais at the chamber's center. The glowing murals above shimmered as if alive, the painted stars swirling into constellations she did not recognize. "Layla!" Daniel's voice cracked as he fought against Michael, the beast that had been Michael. Claws slashed across his chest, sending him sprawling. In a spray of blood, Sarah screamed, rushing to him, while Hassan frantically traced hieroglyphs on the prophecy tablet, muttering spells under his breath. Anubis loomed over them all, towering, regal, inexorable. His staff pulsed with black gold light, the scales, in his other hand trembling with weight unseen. His jackal eyes fixed on Layla as the chains hoisted her upright before him. "The living seek to weigh the dead," he intoned, his voice echoing like thunder in a storm. "The balance is shattered, yet one soul may restore it. One offering may seal the gate." Layla forced herself to meet his gaze. "If it's me you want, then take me. Let the others go." The god's muzzle twitched. "A noble lie. Yet your heart will tell the truth. The scales see all." The scales glowed brighter. One plate sank low, heavy with unseen weight. The other rose, almost empty. Shadows crept outward from Anubis's feet, seeping into the walls. From the cells surrounding the chamber, skeletal prisoners writhed and moaned, their chains rattling violently. Sarah clutched Daniel, tears streaming. "She can't do this. Please don't let her." Hassan shouted over her cries. "The prophecy. The amulet without it, the Pharaoh rises. We need it." His words drew Layla's eyes to Michael. The beast crouched near Anubis's side, amber eyes blazing, the Ouroboros amulet clenched tight in his claws. The symbol pulsed with sickly light, its golden serpent writhing as though alive. The Pharaoh's mummy, once motionless on the altar, began to stir again, the wrappings splitting as unseen strength pushed against them. The gate to the Duat, the underworld, was opening. Layla's chest tightened. This wasn't only about her life. If Anubis succeeded, if the Pharaoh rose, the damned would flood the world of the living. She couldn't allow that, but the chains bit deeper, searing her skin. "Your heart," Anubis said, lowering the scales. Toward her, "It will be weighed. If it is lighter than a feather, you pass into eternity. If not, His glowing eyes turned to the writhing skeletons. "You join the chain." The scales trembled closer. Suddenly, Daniel staggered forward, blood soaking his shirt. "Take me instead," he shouted, his voice breaking. Anubis turned his jackal head toward him. "Your soul is already weighed. It falters." Michael lunged at Daniel, snarling, but Sarah shrieked and swung a fallen torch. Flames licked across the beast's fur, and it howled, thrashing back. For a moment, the amulet slipped from its grasp, clattering across the stone Gat Hassan dove. His hand closed around the Ouroboros. The chamber erupted. The murals above blazed to life, stars spinning madly. The chains rattled like thunder. Anubis roared, the sound shaking dust from the ceiling. "Restore it." Hassan cried, thrusting the amulet toward Lala. "Only you can." The chains binding her slackened, as though the amulet's presence weakened their hold. Summoning every ounce of strength, Layla tore one hand free, reaching for the serpent symbol. The instant her fingers touched it, a surge of energy coursed through her veins. Burning and freezing all at once, visions flooded her mind. She saw the Pharaoh's rebellion, his attempt to command Anubis. She saw armies chained, souls shackled for eternity. She saw the scales tipping endlessly, searching for balance. And she saw herself standing alone in the chamber, holding the amulet, the fate of both worlds resting on her decision. Her knees buckled, but she forced herself upright. "The prophecy," she whispered, "only by restoring the serpent and balancing the scales." Anubis advanced, fury blazing in his eyes. "You cannot bind me, mortal. I am the guardian. I am eternity." A mummy on the altar tore free from its wrappings, its hollow eyes glowing with golden fire. The Pharaoh rose, his mouth opening in a silent scream that shook the chamber. Layla raised the amulet high. The Ouroboros gleamed, its golden serpent swallowing its tail, a perfect circle. She remembered the murals. The Pharaoh bound, Anubis standing over him, chains encircling the defiant. But there had been another figure too, a mortal, kneeling, offering themselves to complete the sealed sacrifice. The realization struck her like a blow. The amulet could restore the gate, but only if bound to a willing soul. Her soul. Layla turned to her friends. Daniel, broken but alive, clutching Sarah close. Hassan, staring at her with desperate hope. All of them looking to her, depending on her. She smiled faintly, tears burning her eyes. "Tell the world what happened here. Don't let them forget." Before they could protest, she pressed the amulet to her chest. Agony ripped through her. The Ouroboros burned into her flesh, searing a circle of fire around her heart. Her vision blurred as light poured from her body, flooding the chamber. Anubis howled, raising his staff to strike. But the scales in his hand wavered, one plate sinking, the other rising. The light engulfed him, wrapping chains of pure gold around his limbs. He roared in defiance, but the chains tightened, dragging him backward, into the swirling void that yawned behind him. The Pharaoh shrieked as spectral hands reached from the duet, dragging him down. His body convulsed, the golden fire in his eyes extinguishing as he was pulled screaming into the abyss. Michael, too, was caught. His beastly form writhed, claws scraping stone, until the light tore him apart, dissolving flesh and bone into ash. His final scream was swallowed by the void. The souls of the damned shrieked as they were dragged back into darkness, their skeletal forms crumbling to dust. The chamber shook violently, stones crashing from the ceiling. Layla stood at the center of it all, her body blazing like a star. Chains of light coiled around her, binding her arms, her legs, her very soul. She felt no pain, now only peace. Anubis's voice, softer now, reverberated in her mind. "You have chosen. The scales are balanced. The gate is sealed. You are bound. Mortal as guardian. Her last breath escaped in a whisper. So be it. With a final flash, the chamber collapsed not when the dust settled. Daniel, Sarah, and Hassan found themselves lying outside the ruins. The dawn sun painted the desert in gold and crimson. The entrance to the tomb had collapsed completely, sealed by tons of stone. Daniel coughed, clutching his chest. Layla. Sarah sobbed against his shoulder. Hassan sat silently, staring at the horizon, the prophecy tablet clutched to his chest. None of them spoke for a long time. At last, Hassan whispered, "She saved us. She saved everyone." Daniel bowed his head. But at what cost? From deep within the ruins, faint and distant, a whisper drifted on the wind. "Do not break the chains." Epilogue. Years later, another team of archaeologists stumbled upon the half-buried fortress. Among the sand and ruins, they found fragments of hieroglyphs, warning of eternal chains and a guardian bound within. They dismissed the warnings as superstition. But when night fell, and the wind howled through the desert, one of them swore they heard a woman's voice, soft and sorrowful, echoing from the depths below. "Do not break the chains."